I survived 4.5 years in a Panamanian prison in 2015, and I am in the process of rebuilding my life from scratch. You know, the way that they wrote me in, I give them credit. They did a really good job.
We are far from the ashes. Rise up, break the cage, be the lion, be the storm, be the strike of the lightning.
We're good to go. All right, y'all. Welcome back. If you came back for episode 2, I'm so excited that you're here. Welcome back to episode 2 of From Scratch with Alana Moore. I am Alana Moore, your host. So excited to be here. You know, it's so crazy, everything that's been happening in my life this past week or so. But the topic of tonight is, we're going to go back, way back into time. If this is your first time here, actually, just so you know, I survived 4.5 years in a Panamanian prison in 2015. And I am in the process of rebuilding my life from scratch and walking through that journey with you as someone who hasn't made it, as someone who has goals and dreams and a vision for her life, but is figuring it out with you in this podcast. And as someone who a year ago gave her life to Jesus, I was baptized. I gave my life to the Lord and decided to really start to focus on building a relationship and a better understanding with the Lord and what that looks like. So this week, what I thought would be really, really cool is sort of taking you back to what it was like before I went to prison. We haven't gotten too much into that. We will. So I think what I want to do is go back, like I said, to what today's theme is going to be, which is living in the world is a lie. That's a really, really deep, that is a really important line for me. Because I think that when I think about the way that my life was, I was reflecting on what was my life really like before I went to prison. And, if I was to sit down, I always say this to people, if you really want to know what you're like as a person, sit down with 3 or 4 people that have known you for a really long time and ask them, what was I like when? And they're going to really tell you. So people would have told you that the type of person that I was messy. I was messy. I was unreliable. I was disorganized. I was a thought. I was in the club. I was drunk. I was partying. I was the life of the party. I had no understanding of the detriment that I was doing to myself and the detriment that I was doing to others, because I felt like I was just living the life. And I was very selfish. I was very self-centered. I was very self-focused. I loved to go out and have a good time. It didn't matter to me if I showed up or I didn't show up. I would make excuses. I would lie all the time. But at the same time, I had good intentions. Even though a lot of Christians would tell me, as they told me tonight, it's like, you can't say that you had a good heart. But my dad would always tell me, because my dad's not a Christian, you have a good heart, which means essentially my intentions were good. So I ask you, if you've been through a change in your life, what were you like before this change? What was the reason that you changed? Because typically when we are faced with a time in our lives when we make a change, it's because of that, right? And so when I think about the way that God has really shown up in my life, it was like God really allowed this situation to happen of me going into prison, because I was in a place in my life where my life was chaos. I was living in Toronto at the time. It's so interesting. I had moved to Toronto because I wanted to become a famous fashion designer, right? And, I had this sort of like double standard in my life where it's like I would go out, I would party, I would have a really good time, and I would get up in the morning and go to school, go to college, where I had a 3.7 and I would graduated with honors, right? But there was this idea in my head that the validation of my life would only come from outside wins. And so everything that I was doing, every decision that I made in my life, leading up to me going to prison in 2015, was all centered in the world. And it was all centered with instant gratification. And it was all centered in getting attention from outside sources, right? For me, it was being rich and famous. I wanted to be a famous fashion designer. And so I was around people. I was doing anything that I needed to do to be in that world, right? So when I really think about it, it's like I was kind of a joke. Like I understand why people probably, if I asked people now, they would probably wouldn't have a lot of great things. Actually, it's so funny. I'm remembering the story. There was a girl named Mata. I hope one day she sees this. There was this girl named Mata when I first moved to Toronto. And I was a crazy party girl before I went there. And I remember I was sitting down and I was talking to her. And she goes, Alana, I heard you were easy. And I was like, excuse me? And she said, I heard you were easy. Like, I heard that, like, you get around and you do these things. And, like, I think that you should think about changing that. And I remember that always stuck with me because I don't know if you've ever been in a place in your life where someone has said something to you that is the truth. And what happens when we hear the truth? It hurts. It does not feel good. You feel uncomfortable. You feel defensive. You feel like you want to make that somebody change their opinion of you, right? Now, I didn't actually change anyone's opinion of me. I probably just made it worse because Toronto was that sort of detriment to my life. But I truly believe that the Lord permitted for all of that to happen in my life because at the end of the day, I know that I jump around a lot, but at the end of the day, I still had free will. That's one thing that I do know, is that I was still given the opportunity to make good decisions for myself, right? Opportunities would present themselves. I could make good decisions for myself. But I was living in a world where I saw that instant gratification and overnight success, so I thought, was the way to get to the top. And I wanted to be at the top. I don't know if you've ever been in a position in your life too where you're like, you want to get to where you want to go fast and you're willing to do anything to get there. And some of you may have taken the correct route to get there. That was not me. I did not. I wanted to do anything that I could do for attention because I was craving that. I was so empty. I was so numb. And that attention made me feel like I was validated. And that was a lie. And that's why I say today is all about that living in the world is a lie. Because really, really, the life that I was living, it really kept me empty. In our lives, some of the things that really keep us empty, we talk about relationships, looking for attention, chasing money, body image, social media validation. That one's a huge one. Toxic friends, drinking, drugging, escaping, performing, pretending to be someone that they're not. And I think that this is really common in our 20s. I think there's a lot more awareness now and people are sort of like invited to really be more themselves, even when it comes to Christianity. Like I'm seeing way more young people, being open about their Christianity than they ever were. But for me, that was not the case. I always talked about having a relationship with God, but that was not helping me discern my decisions, right? I went to God when I needed God. I went to God when shit hit the fan. That was it. And so I'm just having this like remembrance of all the things. So I'm going to give you guys a little bit of a visual. And some of you that, knew me back then, y'all are going to be, man, I have to tell you guys this too. Like, it's so crazy when now that I'm doing this podcast too, what's really cool is that I'm actually sitting in front of a mirror again, really looking at like, who was I really before I decided that I wanted to not be that anymore, which a lot of that I still am. And a lot of that, is going to be a journey, but it's like, I think about the friends that I hurt. I think about the men that I slept with. I had no respect for my body. I had no respect for myself or others. I didn't really respect my parents the way that they deserve to be respected. I didn't respect other people's time, right? I didn't respect other people's emotions or feelings. I wasn't there for people the way I needed to be. I was dating a guy that, he was a pimp, and I thought I loved him. I mean, until recently, until a few years ago, I thought I loved this man. But, I was around the lifestyle where it was like I was going with him to the strip club to get money from the girls that were working for him, right? And him and I were hanging out and smoking weed every single day and having sex. And I was spending the whole day sleeping until 12, not taking care of my body, not eating right. And then like trying to get up and go to the gym and going to get my nails done and my hair done. And then going to work at the bar, or going to work at the strip club that I was working at, or going to work at the restaurant that I was working at, and then going out to the nightclub after. That was a typical night for me. And if you are like feeling like you can relate to that right now, it's because I think a lot of us in that time of our lives felt like that was normal because it was so normalized. But then let me ask you this. What happens the next day when you wake up at 12 o'clock? You're alone, you're hungover, you feel sad, and you feel empty. And that's why I believe that living in the world is a lie. Because now, when I feel sad, I go for a run. I read the Bible. I talk to my friends. I get advice. I eat well. I don't go smoke weed. I don't go get drunk. I don't go sleep around. Right? So that was sort of the cycle of my life. Couldn't be relied on for nothing. Made great money in the bar. Was like, looked good on the outside, felt empty on the inside. And so I think that was the reason why it was so easy for me to be wrapped into that lifestyle. Because, I was talking to someone about this today, and I was saying, I was definitely up against the women that I hung out with. I was not one of the prettiest girls, but I watched beautiful women around me, and it's like it was harder for them because they were not able to really, they were not respected for their hearts or for what they had to offer. And so I was around that type of lifestyle all the time. I used to go to the strip club, and I used to watch the best players in the NBA come in, sit down, get a booth, get bottles, leave at the end of the night with, this Instagram model prostitute. And that's what they were doing. They were spending 30 grand for that. So that was what I was around. And I have to tell you guys, I thrived on it. I know I talk about being empty, but like I really loved it at the time. I did. And there's still a part of me to this day that I would love to be able to go out and it be okay for me to go and party and have a good time. I'm not going to lie and be like, oh, that's gone. It's been completely rid of me. No, I actually have to work hard every single day to focus on filling myself with things that are going to benefit me at the end of my life. It's not easy. So when the day came that, I got hooked up, I wanted to be, this famous fashion designer. And it was like, okay, I'm going to be a stylist. And now I'm going to, I see this girl. I was working at a nightclub at that time doing bottle service. The guy I was dating at the time, this is a different guy than the one I was telling you guys about. Anyways, he was, I think this man really had my best interest at heart. But that was wrong too. Because the heart be lying, y'all. But, I met this girl that was like doing these parties. And so I got hooked up with her and I started styling her. And I did that for about a year and a half. But her thing and her promise to me, which is where I felt like I had made it, was she was like, listen, you work for me for free. I'm going to take you under my wing. I'm going to introduce you to everybody. And so that high that I was chasing was being fulfilled every single day. Like, I was meeting people in the industry. People were starting to kind of know who I was as her stylist. I started making clothes at that time. I remember this this guy that played for the Raptors at that time came into the strip club that I was working at. I was wearing some of my clothes. Excuse me, y'all. I was wearing some of my clothes, and he was like, "I like that. What is that?" I'm like, "That's my clothing line." And my clothing line was called Judged. And he's like, "Okay, I'm going to get that for some of my girls." And it was like, I felt like my head was blowing up. It was like all those worldly experiences were being fulfilled. And it's like, even right now when I talk about it, there's a part of me that misses it. Of course. Because I felt like that was the way for me to get validation for who I was. And right now, when I sit here and I'm talking to you, I have almost no money in my bank account. I don't really have a lot of friends. I have a few core people that I love that are around me. I'm not a millionaire. I do live in one of the most beautiful places in the world, though. And I have God in my life. And the friendships that I have are meaningful. And I have a beautiful relationship with my son. But the world is a liar, right? And we live in a world where, this is where the devil lives. I was talking to someone today about how, like, the devil is disguised as what? The angel of light? Is that what it is? And I'm like, yeah, it's so true. So, I'm in that time of my life. You've probably been in times of that, like that in your life. And maybe you haven't. Maybe you're just listening to this being like, no, this is interesting. But I remember getting the phone call one day where it was like, I so badly wanted to prove to myself and to prove to my parents and prove to everyone else that I was going to make it, right? And we can get even further back into who I was, like, going to rehab at 19, meeting really great friends in rehab, not drinking, getting back into drinking, moving to Toronto, like throwing that all down the drain. Like, there was all of that involved. But I really remember that day when I got the phone call from the girl that I was working for and with. And it was like, "Come into the office. I have a really good opportunity for you." And I talk about this a few times. I've talked about this when I'm on stage. And I'm like, when you go into, for the ladies, you go into Sephora and you need a lip liner. And somehow when you walk out, you've got all the new Fenty Beauty products. You've got the new body sprays. You got the new Kayali perfume. You've got all the new face peels that you're seeing all over TikTok. And you have spent $6 when all you needed to do was spend 30. That was who I was up against. I was up against somebody that knew that they were doing what they were doing, saw that I was vulnerable because I was weak. I wasn't strong, right? I came off as if I was strong and I had this tough character and this and that, but I was desperate. I wanted fame because I thought that that was going to validate me and really make people realize how amazing I was. Am I really amazing? Whatever. But that's what I believed at that time. And so when I got that phone call and I was brought into the office, and it was one of the most famous rappers in the world. It was his right-hand man. Actually, at the time, it was his trainer. No, I will not tell you who it was. It was his trainer. And, the way that they roped me in, I give them credit. They did a really good job. It was like the best sales pitch that I've ever seen. They knew what they were doing. They knew that the other women that I was around, they could have never gotten them. Because I think about the girls that I was around. I don't even want to say her name right now, but I want to, because she is one of the strongest, but one of the most beautiful women I have ever seen in my life. Her name's Sylvana. She gonna be mad that I said this, but she's one of the most beautiful women I've ever seen in my life, but one of the strongest women I've ever seen in my life. They were not about to ask her to go and bring a bag back from Panama, because she would have laughed at them and got up and left, right? Because she was confident and she was strong in who she was as a woman, and people respected her. They were not going to ask the other women that I was around either, but they knew that I was desperate and I was disorganized and I was sloppy. And so they did. And they had one conversation with me, y'all. Imagine that. One conversation. This is what we want to do. But first of all, they sold me first of like, hey, and I really trusted them too. So if you've been in that position in your life too, where you've really trusted someone and you're like, this person would never do that to me. They would never hurt me like that. Like, I knew this girl's family. I'd met her family. I'd met her sister. She really took me under her wing. Like, she introduced me to everybody. Sorry about my voice, y'all. I don't know what happened. Sounds like I was up in a fete just like screaming, but I wasn't. Next year. And so that was it. It was just like, hey, we've been watching your work. We see what you're doing. We know you're doing a clothing line. We want to help you bring it off the ground. We want you to come and style this artist. And I still, like, even right now when I talk about it, it makes me want to cry. Like, my whole body went hot. And I felt like, okay, I made it. Wow. I actually made it. All this hard work, because even though I'm sitting here and I'm tearing myself down, I was still hustling, you guys. I was still getting up every day, and I was going to work at local where I was bartending, and then I'd get off work and then I'd go to F as in Frank, which is where my boy landlord had his clothing store. And he would let me come in at like 2:00 in the morning, go get clothes, pick out looks for this girl. And I'd go home, sleep for a few hours, and then go meet her at 8 a.m. Style her, go home. And that was like the hustle. That was what I really wanted to do. That was the vision for myself. So I was getting up and I was doing what I thought I needed to do to get ahead. So when this opportunity came for me, it really felt like I wasn't having these conversations with myself of like, who are you really and how do you really feel? And like, what are you trying to prove? It was more just like, I made it. I did what I needed to do. I hustled. Like, I am just like all these NBA players that I'm seeing, all these Instagram models that I'm seeing, all of these artists that I'm hanging out with that are so successful. I'm finally getting on their level. And I believed like if I did it this way, they probably have done it this way too. So, I felt protected. I felt like I was coming into a family that was about to protect me and take me in. And, these are like some of the most famous people in the world, even to this day. And so when I felt and when I heard and when they were like, you're coming in to be part of the family, that's like, that is the goal. So I thought. But I'm also here to tell you that overnight success is a lie. It's part of the world. It's not true. So, I made that decision in that moment. I don't hold the decision that I made against anybody. That's another thing we need to make very, very clear. I am not here because of blame, but in that moment, I really was roped in to a lifestyle that I thought was going to give me the fame that I really wanted. And that wasn't it. And now when I look back on the situation, it's really, really interesting because I can see where God permitted for me to end up in prison, because I swear, I'm not allowed to say that either. I learned that the other day, because I really believe that God was like, this girl is crazy. She's wild. She really has lost the understanding of free will. So we need to do something. Because I was talking to a friend about this tonight. I was like, I think that if I didn't end up in prison right now, I might be a famous fashion designer, maybe. Or maybe I'd be racked up in a house with 4 kids, with 4 baby daddies. Or maybe I'd be in an apartment drinking a bottle by myself, fame and fortune, all of it, but empty. Empty. Because that wasn't the thing that was going to fill me up. And that's why the world is a lie. The world is not what is going to fill you up. Don't come at me for saying this, because I can't even believe this is about to come out of my mouth, but I can't even believe I'm about to say what I'm about to say, but the word of God is what is going to fill you up. That is crazy. That is why I'm here. So, that being said, if you're in a place in your life where you're feeling empty and you're like, there's something that's not right. It's like you're working really, really hard for these goals and you really want things to work out for yourself. Or maybe you're out and you are partying and you're having a good time, But at the end of the night, you're kind of like, something's off. Or maybe you know that this lifestyle that you're living is toxic, right? Or maybe it's none of those things. But there was something so purifying or so helpful when I was arrested, which we will get into. Because I say, for me personally, my journey of self-discovery, which is still happening, but my journey of self-discovery was having to sit with myself with no outside influences in front of a mirror for 4.5 years. That was hard. That was where it all came crashing down. And where I really went, I'm not the I'm nobody. I never was who I thought I was. I was weak, and I was desperate, and I was messy. And now I have a choice, just like you have a choice, to turn that around. Now, I want to show you how you can make those choices. I want to help you to understand what are some of the first things that you can do if you are feeling like that. And I am going to be really honest with you guys. The very first time that I ever read the Bible, I said this to my friend Sydney tonight, the very first time that I ever read the Bible was in prison. I thought I had a relationship with God before that. I didn't. I know that God was watching over me. That's great, but I didn't. And I knew that God was going to have grace with me because I was told tonight that he was, but I would just open up the Bible and read until I read something that, resonated with me, right? So life, and that was something that really, really helped me. So here's the thing. Life is messy. We know that. But I really feel like, let me just open this because I did take some notes tonight. I think it's really important. I really feel like if you are in this point or you feel like, hey, like I feel kind of empty, or I feel like I'm not doing what I need to do, or like my life is messy. Like, yes, life is messy, but it's like, I want you to really sit down and look at yourself and ask yourself this: what is keeping you empty? And if you really want to go deeper, ask the 3 closest people to you, because I had to do that. I had to sit down with my birth mother. I had to sit down with my father. I had to sit down with my mother. My mother does not hold back. She does it with love. I had to sit down with the girl I was in prison with, which I won't really get into in this podcast, but I wasn't there alone, who really ripped me open and showed me who I was at that time. And I wasn't a good person. I had good intentions, but I wasn't a good person. And so I believe that God allowed for this situation to happen, to put me into prison, which there's probably a ton of people out there still that probably would say that I'm not a good person. That's fine. I'm not looking for your validation. But I think that position allowed me to be in a space to go, okay, what do I want to do to change, right? So right now, if you ask yourself, like, what is it that is keeping me empty? What am I chasing that will never fulfill me? What am I holding on to that's draining me? What am I doing for approval instead of alignment? We're all doing something for approval, right? So that is something that is going to, when you start to look at those things, write them down. It's really important that you start to write these things down. It doesn't have to be kept in something that's in order, but that was something that really, really helped me. And, if you're curious about what it looks like to start to have that kind of a relationship as well, start to ask yourself those questions, because that was sort of the moment for me. Typically, it's when we hit those like rock bottom moments that really bring us to that point of like, okay, God, now I need you, right? And maybe I'm wrong for saying this, but that's okay. That was okay. That was okay for me. That the only way that I was going to reach out to God was when I had nothing else to give. That's okay. coming from my perspective, because that was the only way that I was going to actually begin to see that there was a God that wanted to show me his word and show me through his word the things that I could do and needed to do to sort of be more loving, be more forgiving, just live Christ-like, which I do not do well, y'all, but I'm definitely on the path towards that. So that being said, you don't have to sit in that emptiness. You really, really don't. And I think the next step of this is like, okay, so you had that life before you went into prison that was, this crazy celebrities and this and that. And then like that, boom, it was all taken away from me for my own decision. Don't get me wrong. I take responsibility for the decision I made. But now where did it go from there? Right? Because that stepping into that prison for that very first time was like, that part of it was crazy for me. Because from there, it was like, there's nowhere to go from here but up. You could not have had a more rock bottom than that. And sometimes that is just where you need to go to make the decision to actually see that. I can't even believe I'm going to say this either, but having a relationship with God and learning about the gospel. Okay, I got to stop. Who am I? But learning about the gospel, how much it can change your life. Like it really, really can. It really can. And so that was where it all started for me. And I didn't know it because for 2 years after I got out, I got more into like Buddhism and like being spiritual and all of that. But I learned very quickly that that was not going to get me anywhere. So whether you like it or not, that's just the way it is. I'm excited. Some of the things I want to tell you guys, first of all, that I'm excited about with this podcast as well, if you're still here, is I'm really, really excited to walk through my journey of starting my life from scratch and walking through my journey with the Lord, because this is going to be a journey that we walk together. My focus and my vision for this is that I can bring in experts. I will be bringing in experts that can talk about, their relationship and what they've done and, how it is that we begin to grow together. And where do we go from here, right? I am going to share the word with you, probably starting next week. I feel like I want to be like, I heard from God, but that is probably not true. But I felt like I think it would be really important to start sharing. I don't know the Bible well at all. So it's like, I want to get to know the Bible with you more so we can learn it together. I want to tell you about, how it is. What are the things that I've done in my life to create more discipline? What are the frameworks that I created while I was in prison to build better habits for myself so that you can build better habits for yourself? How starting with flossing my teeth was the thing that like really helped me to build those habits and all of it. And I'm so happy that you're here. So I just, first of all, want to say thank you to God always for even just like what is happening right now. I can't even believe it, but believe it, because these things do happen. And I'm not here because of me. I really am not. This is the journey that we need to go on together. You guys are going to help me, and God is going to help me. And I hope that I can help one person at least to feel more empowered to walk through the journey that they're going through. So I love y'all. I hope you have a fabulous day.